I'm Susan, and today I thought I'd show you my hoard of watches. I have been saving little watch faces for years. Now, most of you that watch me, I am assuming are hoarders like me. I have all of these old watches. People give me these. I've taken all the bands off of them because most of the bands were either broken or something was wrong with them. And I've kept them all together because I just think they're really neat. And I'm sure some of you have watch faces or watches also, or these are like little shadow boxes, as I would call them. They're little encasements that you can put a whole different background in here if you want. And I even sometimes, I never throw the watch faces away because I always use those. But there's lots of neat things you can do with these. And I just wanted to do a video that was totally different. Well, now that I've got these watches all separated so we can see which ones I'm going to play with. Now, to get these open can be a little bit tricky. I just put them on a dried out baby wipe just so they don't scratch. And underneath one side, and you have to look carefully, but there's a little ledge there, and it's in a different position on each watch. So I just hold it down and wedge my little screwdriver under there, and it's pretty easy to pop this open. And then I can pull out all the inner workings. Now, I want to recycle all my batteries, so I want to pull that battery out so I can recycle that separately and pull out my watch face. Now, sometimes this is glued at the stem here, and so you want to make sure you just clip it. Now, I'll just put my casings all aside. I'm going to do another video. I don't want to do these two together. It'll be too long. Now I'm going to take some UV resin and coat these. Some of these will take a little bit more than others. This one is nice and tight. There's not much, you can see there's not much sticking out there. But then ones like this, they're sticking out quite far, so it'll take a few coats to get that to dome up. Doesn't really matter. I'm just looking for, to me it's just about getting them coated, and I like where they stopped. It's all a place in time. And I think they'll look neat just as beads, just as they are. I feel that just taking it straight out of the bottle is all that's necessary. So I will coat these, but just take your bottle and let it fill up that whole piece. Which is beautiful. It gives it a glass-like finish. I'll come back and bring it closer after I get these all covered. Now I have my watch faces all covered with some UV resin. It really creates like a glass coating on these. So they almost look like they have a prism on them, but they don't. They're just the resin on them, and it really seals them in beautifully. Now I've left the bottoms that had the parts on it. I feel like they're so small and they don't really weigh much that they kind of give it a little bit of heft. It leaves it a little bit above the felt, and I feel like that gives it a little bit more dimension. And if I want to put flowers or other beads around this, it'll leave me a little bit more room where I don't want that to enclose my watch. I want the watch face to be my centerpiece. In order for me to bead this, I'm just going to take a little E6000. I have some stiff felt here. If you don't have stiff felt, I have a video on how you can make your regular felt stiff. And I'm just going to glue this part that has the mechanism. So I'm just putting a little bit of glue on the mechanism. You can see I've got my felt all graphed out. I'm just looking for the center point. It makes it easier for me to line this up and know where the center is. Now, is it important that it's in the center of the felt? No. It's important if I decide that I want to add beads on the sides or the top that I know where the center point is, because even though this is marked like a clock, when you're beading, things can get very distracting. It's much easier to have it all lined up when you start. To add a beaded bezel around my watch face, I have some Nymo thread and a size 10 beading needle. I'm using just a comfortable length. There's no particular length you need, and I'm making a starter stitch. And I'm just going to speed through this because I'm sure you've seen this through many of my other videos. If you haven't watched me before, I have lots of bead embroidery videos where I do the same exact technique over and over. And I'm going to right around this circle, real easy. If you notice, I came straight up around the circle. I'm going to go right down around it. I added 4 beads, and I'm going to go right down around this watch face, and I'm going to go up right in between the two beads. So I'm coming up between two beads right here, and I'm going through those last two beads. Now I'm adding 4 more beads and going down and repeating the process of coming up through the last 2 that I added. Now this is a process that will be repeated all the way around. You're going through, you add 4 beads, you come back through to right before the last 2 beads, go through those last 2 beads so that you're coming out that last bead, add 4 more beads, and use the edge of the watch face just to go straight up and down. And just continue going through the last 2 beads. And you want to keep even numbers just because it's easier to balance this as you get to the end. So if you have room for 1 more bead, don't add it. Try to even it out with 2 beads. Now I will meet you around the other side once I've gone all the way around the watch face. Now I've gone completely around the watch face, and I'm coming out through the last bead that I went through, the last 2 beads, following the same pattern. I'm going to add 1 bead and skip a bead so it will stick out. Basically I'm going to peyote around it. So I'm just adding a bead which will stick out like that, skipping a bead, adding a bead, skipping a bead, and doing this completely around the watch face. Now I've gone all the way around adding a bead and skipping a bead. I am going to add a bead and connect to the first bead that we added that's sticking out. So you see all these beads that are sticking out, we're now going to zip them up by adding a bead in between them. And I'll do this all the way around. You can see how it's starting to stand up and the beads are starting to layer around my watch face. I'll continue beading all the way around the watch face. Now I'm at the end and I have my last bead to add, and I'm going through that first bead we added. It gets a little fiddly because it's just at the top of where my watch face is. Now you could add another row, but I don't want to cover the numbers. They're very important to me. So I'm going to switch size beads. So now I'm adding a size 15 bead. Now this size 15 seed bead is very tiny. It's the size of a poppy seed. So I'm adding it in between the same way we did the 11s. And that will start to pull this up. That will start to pull this up and around here. And I want to be very cautious that I just finish it around the edge of the watch face and not cover it. So I will continue all the way around adding my size 15s. So you're adding a bead, skipping a bead, and it's pretty easy to do this because you see your beads are up and down, and you're going through the high bead and you're adding the bead above the low bead. And there you can see where I've added the little bead in between. That's the size 15. Now my final way around, I'm going to add my 15s and put a bead in between each 15. And that will pull this all up and around. And if it's not up and around far enough around your watch face, you can add more, depending on how thick it is. I think this should do it for me. So I'm just adding them right in between. And you can see how it's building up this beautiful little bezel. Now to tie this all together, I'm just going through the last row of 15 beads that I added. So every other bead, I'm just skipping through, and this is basically the beads that are sticking up. And pulling this all together, this will just tie this all nice and tight and make it a perfect little bezel. So you can see when I pull it how it tightens right up around those numbers. Now I just can go down through those beads on the side there and tie this off, and I'll add another piece of thread. This one's only got a few inches left on it. This is how I will bezel all of those watch faces before I put them all together. Now you can use any color beads you want around the edge or any color thread. I used the red thread so you could see clearer, and the gold was just another bright color I thought that went well with the watch faces. Well, after a busy day of beading, I have beaded all around all of these pieces. And now is the fun time. Now we get to decide what is going to go together. I'm not going to put these all in one necklace because I feel I wanted to show you some different techniques. But I want to do a necklace with 3 of them. And so I'm going to pick this one because it's a larger one. Yeah, we'll go with this one. I want to make a pendant piece that goes down with 3 of these watch faces, because obviously they're stuck in time, so they're not going to ever move. Nobody's ever going to ask you what time it is. They're going to be upside down to you, so if you looked at them, because if you've ever had a watch necklace, the watch goes upside down like this, so the person wearing it can look down and see what time it is. But these are going to be all for decorative purposes only, just for visual purposes. So this will be at the top to the bottom. I am going to pick some things that are blue. I just feel like I'm in a blue mood, and I'm just going to start, I think I'm going to work from side to side on these ones because they'll be attached, so I want them to be wider rather than longer. I don't want to make the piece too long. You know something? I'm going to just leave those 2. And this is the process that I go through where I just start playing with things, just finding what talks to me. And for some reason, I like working with a lot of times the same color, just monochromatically, just because you don't have to think. Now, these watch faces being just bland colors pretty much leave you an open ticket to whatever you want to do. Now, why am I laying all of these out at the same time? Because when I lay these out individually, and I'm not paying attention, they don't always match cohesively. So when you're doing a piece like this where you're going to put 3 pieces together that are random, make sure you check that they all match and that they kind of go together. Now I'm working on this design and I love these flowers on the side. That's my natural tendency to go to. But when you add the rhinestones, most of you would probably add these turquoise ones. I'm not adding these turquoise ones. I'm showing you the difference. There's no contrast with the turquoise. They keep rolling off because of the camera. These turquoise ones match too closely. They're too close to the flower color. They're not going to add any drama. They don't want to stay anyway, so they're telling me, let me go. Where the darker ones have more of a contrast. So sometimes when you're trying to go monochromatic, don't go too monochromatic that it just all matchy-matchy. You want to have some contrast in there. So I'm going to definitely use the darker rhinestones. You'll see a little bit better. So always add a little bit of a contrast, even if it's just that they're both in a blue. That darker blue adds so much more richness and contrast, and the starkness of the watch face, you really need something that's going to contrast and pop. So don't be caught in this trap of everything has to match in the same tone. It's the biggest thing I see in the comments is, where do you get your ideas? How do you start this? Just start with this one piece. You see that you've got the rest of the pieces. I've got plenty of little flower beads here that I can use. I've got plenty of other little crystals that I can use and crystal beads, so I know it's going to come together. Just start your biggest one and go from there. That would be my recommendation. Now to start sewing my piece, I've taken the rhinestones off and I'll take the other flowers off and I'll start with each end sewing the flowers on. It's just easier. I'm going to sew the flowers on off camera just because I don't want to make this video too long. I'm going to use a size 15 gold bead in the center. You can use any color you like. I prefer gold because I feel that it matches the bezel. It'll just set it off nicely. And now I'm just going to add my flower and 3 of my size 15 seed beads. Just going back and forth, adding the seed beads in. Now that I've added 1 seed bead, I love 3 seed beads in the center of each one. So I'm just going to go back and add 1 inside of each of my flowers. And I will add the flowers on the other side. Now I have my flowers on both sides all sewn in. I'm going to take a little bit of my E6000. And most people would say, but these have little holes in them. Why don't you just sew them on? Well, they barely stay in place. So they can be very fiddly and frustrating to work with. I find just a little dab of glue, put them in place, let them dry for 5 minutes, makes them a world of difference. I'm only adding that tiny little dot, but boy, it's like your best friend once you try to work with these. They are not easy to get them to stay in the place you want them to. This way you can place them, know they're evenly, you don't have any worries. Letting this dry for 5 minutes, you come back, this will be so much easier. Now that the glue is dry and these are glued down, you can bend the felt, get right in here, see where the hole is, and not worry about it. Now that I have all my rhinestones sewn on, the only thing I find that I really like, I've tried all my crystals and pearls and everything, I just like the way these flowers complete this. It just completes the circle perfectly, so I'm going to incorporate these flowers. And now that I'm all done finished sewing, I'm just cutting off the felt and leave a little bit of a margin. Now, I always go to the back side, and you probably wonder why. This way I can visually look and see if I'm uneven, because with this way, it's all confusing. Everything looks even, but when you turn it over, you see any little spots, like right here is uneven. I just want to trim that up a tiny bit. And this way, when you're looking at it on the back side, you can see where the stitches are. So right here, I've got a stitch. I don't want to go too close to that, otherwise I will be cutting the thread and have to resew all of this. I take just a piece of cardboard and I trace around my design, and then I cut about a 1/4 of an inch in. And this is just cardboard that I've taken out of the recycling bin. This is of no great value, but this will stiffen it up. Even though I have the watch face in, I'll stiffen it up anyway. Probably not a bad idea. Now, always make sure that you've got plenty of room to stitch around this. You want to make sure it's just a reinforcement. And now when I glue that in the middle, it'll just stiffen it up. Now when I add my ultra suede, and I just have to trim around that. Now, make sure you trim nice and neat, and if you feel that you need to let this dry first, do that if it feels like it's wiggling. Now I have my fabric all trimmed up. I have some more thread, and I have some size 11s. I'm going to go in and add one size 11. I'm then going to go up through that size 11. Now, whatever side you go up through, whether it's the front or the back, you must stay on that side the whole time or your beads will come out wonky. So I'm going to add another bead and go through right next to it. And if this isn't clear on this video, I show this in every one of my bead embroidering videos. And so you're just going to add, you're going to go through the bottom of that coming out the top and just keep adding one bead at a time. So this is a little bit tedious. For me, it's relaxing. You may find that after a while this becomes relaxing once you get the knack of it. And you just go completely around the piece. It's basically a blanket stitch adding a bead if you're familiar with doing embroidery. And it gives you this beautiful finish on the back. It holds both of the fabrics together and it trims it out so nicely. So I will continue that. Well, now I have that top piece done and I'm looking for the second little watch face. And at first I was going with this rhinestone chain, but it doesn't feel right to me with this piece. And then I went and picked up some crystals and they feel right. They have a different depth and texture and that feels really right to me. So I'm going to go sew these on and sew these crystals in place. I think that will really make the difference. And I will put these crystals on exactly how I put the beads on around the beaded bezel, only I put on 2 at a time and go through the last one. It just seems to set them in there perfectly. And I like these white flowers because they transition these opaly beads I have down into the crystals. So I'll sew this all on and come back. Now you could always string along the crystals sideways. Oh, snoring puppy. So that they go around like this. Or you can string them so they come up and they repeat this dot pattern, which is exactly what I'm going to do. So don't be afraid to use your beads both directions. You get different textures each way. And to me, texture is the most important part of your beading. That's what makes things so beautiful, is the different sparkle and textures and matte and shiny. And if you don't have a lot of crystals, this is also another good way to use them. You don't need as many crystals if you're going in this direction versus the other direction. That's not exactly why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I want to repeat that texture and blend it in behind the flower. Now that I have this all beaded around, I'm just going to once again cut my piece and then bead around it. Now if you notice, I have two pieces of felt. This felt was a thinner piece of felt, and I wanted the gray background, so I just put this thinner piece on top of a little bit of a thicker piece just to give it a little bit more body. So don't be afraid if you don't have a color. Or I bought this felt offline. It said stiff felt, that's all it said, stiff beading felt, and when I got it, it was like paper thin. So I just put it on top of this other blue felt so that I had a nice gray background. I wanted a gray background for all my watch pieces just because it was sort of a blank background. I didn't know if I was going to go steampunk or what I was going to do with this. And gray seems to be a nice neutral. I'm going to add my ultra suede backing and my same blue beads in this one because I want a cohesive background color so that they all tie together. I have this piece all finished and edged now, and I'm just going to take my needle and go all the way up to the top, right to the center, because now I can attach it to this bead. Now, of course, this little bead in here is not going to be enough. We're going to have to make some pieces that come across, but we can still attach it where we have it in the center here for right now. So I'm going to go through that top bead and then through the top bead here. Now there's several reasons that I have to meet them in the sides. Not just because that looks kind of weird where it's all just one piece, but also because of the fact that this would spin. And this is not a piece I want to spin, this is a piece I want to remain stationary. I'll go through the side bead here, coming out the side, and add a bead in between while I attach it there. So that will keep it from spinning when I do that on both sides. See, if I put it in the center there, I have room for one bead. And then I'll go across and up and put a bead on this other side and go down through that other piece. Now when I flip it over, you can see it looks a lot better, but I still need some connectors in here. There's too much space in between here visually, and it looks kind of weak at this point. So if I add some other connectors, it will look a lot sturdier and heftier. And the easiest way I can think to add them is to add some crystals in here, or you can even add a herringbone piece. But my problem is I really want to see how it's going to look with this final piece on the bottom. What I'm trying to match on this, because I don't really care about matching a design. Obviously I have different things going on, but I need to match colors. Now I'm trying to incorporate this, and this all together. So this final one has to marry all of these pieces. And I have my rhinestone chain, but I'm just not feeling it. This one is too bright, too much rhinestone. And the tiny one I do like. I feel like that one's much better. But I have to choose between the tiny rhinestones and the crystals because the crystals will drown out the rhinestones, as you can tell. Size-wise, if I put those next to them, you won't even see that the rhinestones are in there. And I think maybe some smaller crystals might just be my trick, something more of this purpley blue color. And the winner is this darker blue. I think this works really nice. It brings in that more of that royal blue down into the bottom here. And this has more of a gray AB on it, so I really like the way that looks a lot better. I am going to now take this piece and sew it all together, and I'll be right back so we can attach that other piece. Now I have my third watch face finished and we can attach it. Now this is really easy, unlike a stone, to attach because your clock face has your center right in it. 12 and 6, and so it's very easy to come out right at 6, make sure you're at the bead right below 6, and go right in the bead above 12. And now I'll flip it over because it's just easier for you to tell what I'm doing. And now I'm just going to go up through the back and go through the beads next to that center bead. So we'll have 3 beads that it's attached here, and 3 beads that it's attached here. Now these 3 actually meet right up straight, so I don't have to add a bead like I did in between here to make it all even. So I can just go right back up through and attach it on both sides. And if you want, you can go down through the middle, which I'm going to do just to give it a little bit reinforcement. always better to be more reinforced than less. And then just go through those beads right next to it. So now you have your third piece all fit in. As you can see, this is really wobbly. It has too much movement to it. So when we attach some side pieces here, it'll bring it together more. I feel like incorporating something on the sides here will pull this all together and make it all more of a solid piece. Where do I come out to make it on the sides? I'm going to go an equal distance on each side. Just the easiest way to think about it, because you know this would be center, you know this is center, so on both the top and the bottom we're coming out. So if we go out 4 on the bottom, on this side we're going out 4 on this side. Same thing, 4 down, 4 down. Whatever number you choose on the first side, you're going to continue that over on the second side. We'll go over 4 beads, and that's 4 beads from the last bead that I just attached. These are about a 4 or 5 millimeter crystal. I'm going to add one of my little seed beads and see how much I need to size this. I never know how much room is going to be in between here. Sometimes this, like everything else, you just have to play with. So I'm going to go into this bead because it just fits right into that. Now sometimes you'll have to move. Oh no, that fits perfect. And you can feel right away where this is not moving now. This is keeping this on point so it's not shifting back and forth, which is what I want. And now I'll just go to this other side and repeat that exact same thing, and I'll go over 4 and over down 5, which is basically what I've done over here. Now I have my bottom piece attached, so I'll add my 2 in here, and then I'll come around and do on the other side and go around in a circle so that I get it built up, and then we can add our next row. Now I would like to add another row here, and I don't know. So now we just have to decide how many do we want here. Yes, I want it to mimic that round shape that we have on these edges. I want it to go out a little bit, so I'm going to put it right there. I'll go back down through it, and now I'll just travel over here and do the same exact thing on the other side. Now to just give you an idea of how these turn into something, I'm starting out with just some blank watch faces. Here's the other ones, and then here's some that I've already laid out a little pattern around for me to embroider in. Watching me embroider is like watching paint dry. I'd rather show you the process and how I create and how I get inspired, because I think to me as an artist that's more important to other people to get started. Sometimes this is where most of us stumble. Now, does this mean this will stay exactly like this? Absolutely not. You've seen already that things switch around. So I'm going to bead around this rhinestone and see where this takes me. And this one I'm pretty sure is going to stay pretty straightforward. Now, another tip, I have the flowers all sewn in. Before I sew the Monties in, these can be extra fiddly getting them in their correct spot. I just, once again, take a little dot of glue, and it's not enough glue to permanently hold it, but it's enough glue to make sure it stays in position when I go to sew it. Otherwise, you'll get one that's kind of wonky, goes to the side, one that does. If you want them all in the same position, use glue, but just a tiny dab right underneath it there. Give it 5 minutes to dry and it'll hold it, that it just makes your life so much easier. And now when I go to sew these down, even though they're very close to the edge here, you can just bend your felt and get right into there, and no worries, because before I glue this down completely and bead around it, I'll reinforce it with a little piece of cardboard, so that will always remain solid. Otherwise. Now here I have that one watch face that I showed you how I laid it out. I have it finished, and I've attached another one to the bottom. And then I attached a bead to the top just to kind of make it more interesting. Now, I've already started and I've got half of this necklace finished. It's quite a menagerie of stuff. I've got 2 more watch faces up here. And then I added some tiny donuts. And the tiny donuts, you're probably wondering, well, how the heck did she add those? I wanted something that added some interest, made this like an unusual mix, very eclectic. And so I've got some polymer clay beads here and some donut beads here, and I assorted my donuts just because I could. I like that assortment. Now I want to show you how I attach these donuts, because a lot of people look at the donuts and they see that the hole is in the middle, so they think, how am I going to hang that? you can see I've got a bead going through the center and I'm going through both sides of it. So let me attach over here and then I'll show you how I do that. Now to attach my donut, I've attached my regular beads here like I did at the top of this. My donut I do 1/2, so I don't even put the donut on until I finish the other end and I'm making a second pass through the necklace, and that's when the other end comes in. Now I have already pre-measured this like I did this side, and I find size 11 beads goes through the center, and then I put on a size 6 bead in the center. Now my beads are about the size of a quarter, and so that would go perfectly through the center. Now you have to remember the thickness of your bead also has to be an account here, because if you don't have enough when you come around the second time, you will be unstringing all of this so that you can add more beads. So you really want to measure this well. So it looks like I have way too much here, but when you see it over here, it's not. I want this to move freely like a little wheel inside. I don't want this to be tight. So I'm adding 11 then for the other side. That will be the center of the bead. So I work with a size 6 bead because it has a larger hole so I can make several passes through it, and it does get kind of tight trying to get in the middle there. I find the 6 is a lot easier to work with. Some of the smaller beads can be very challenging. So I'm going to string this all up and then show you on my second pass. Now I've gone through the whole piece all the way down and I'm coming back up adding my donuts. And you can see that the area is much larger where the donut will fit in, because it's going to wrap through the middle of the donut and around the side, so it shrinks it quite a bit. So you do need your beads to be just a little bit longer, and it does take a little time to measure this. So I have my 11 seed beads that are size 11s, and I'm just going to go through the center of my donut so that it wraps around it, and through that size 6 so that I catch it. Sorry about my snoring puppy. And now I'll go through the center of that donut again, and you can see how it just wraps right around it. Now I'll add my other 11s, and then I will go right through this row of beads underneath here, so I will connect it around that donut once again. And you'll see when I pull this. Now the nice thing is you're adding a lot of beads at once, so it goes really quick. Now you can see when I pull it how it just encapsulates that donut in the center. So it's just really one pass on each side. So I go through my donut, through my 6, and back through my donut, and attaching it on the other side. And that's all there is to it, that you have this beautiful chain of donuts. And you can mix them in with any of your other beads. So I will finish up this necklace and come back and show you what it looks like finished. Here you can see that once I started beading around this rhinestone, my pods fit in a little bit differently, so I flipped them around. And that's why I say that when you lay things out, it's all temporary. Nobody really knows what's going to happen. And I like the way these flowers repeat the colors in my pods, and I've added the smaller flowers on top. Now I feel like I need some of these tiny little bicones, 2 colors that I have that go with this in a 2mm bicone. And obviously there's a color I clearly like better than the other color. When I finish this up, you'll see which one I obviously picked, but there's one that stands out more to me, and a lot of you wonder how I get my color combinations. Basically, I just start comparing like this, which ones look better. It's not a real secret, it's not something that there's a magic to this, it's just a matter of keep playing with your colors and you'll find one talks a little bit more than the other, or there's other colors that you have to work with what you have. You're not going to go out and buy beads to finish something. So with what you have, compare them, and whichever one looks better, that's the one you're going to use. Now obviously you can see which color I picked, and I've added this rhinestone piece to the top. Now I'm just doing a herringbone stitch to connect this, and to do that I'm working right off the edge of the top panel, and I'm just adding 2 beads at a time. Now this won't take you very long, and I'm just going in the top bead there and then going back up through. Now I'm going through the beads that I added and the beads that are on the base. This may be easier to see on the back. And I'm adding 2 beads every time, and I'm going through those 2 beads I added. I'm going through that first bead, going up, and now I'm just going to go next do the bead next to it, and up those 2 beads. And I'll continue that, adding 2 and going up 2. So it goes rather quickly. Now to connect this piece here, I folded mine over so I got a little twist into it. Now you just have to count how many beads down that you went and then just copy that on the other side. So I'm coming out the right side. So after I flip it, it would be 6 beads over. So I'm just going to go into that 6th bead and then up the 5th bead. Now you can add as many as you want of these little connectors. They're very interesting looking because, make sure you go back through that it's twisted. They just add a little bit of definition, and you don't have to have all those other fancy crystals and stuff. You can just use your seed beads for this as a connector. Coming out, I need to fold this one over, and I want to make sure I twist it towards the inside because that's the way it was. And I will go all the way through this. Now you can see how I have that little twist there and how it folds out. I want to add another one, and then I'll come back and show you what that looks like when I finish the necklace. And my favorite part, show and tell. What can I do with these watch faces? Well, these videos took me over a month to make because there was just so much involved and I got so carried away with beading, as you can tell. This one is quite intricate. And these are the beads that we made in the starter box of clay, the tiny kaleidoscope origami beads. So if you're wondering sometimes where do I come up with the beads that I have, I do use all of my beads in my work that you've seen me make in videos, and these were also from the half pods video, just to give you some ideas, because people say, oh, but you didn't use those beads. Yes, I do use those beads in everything I do because I don't have time to make separate beads. But this one has that Alice in Wonderland feel. I went around this rhinestone. That was my inspiration for all the colors after I added it with a contrast to that beautiful black clock face. And I like the way these have time standing still. And this one also has a check button that I used as the closure because I just like the way it looked with all this other kind of vintagey Alice in Wonderland feel to this. This one was one of my favorite ones. I've used a bunch of donut beads. You've seen how I put the donut beads on, and I used lots of watch faces in this just because I thought they were funny, that they're all stuck, and they just kind of have a really interesting look that each one is a little bit different. This is a bead that I've created using a transfer. I haven't done a video on this. If you wanted to see, I really don't transfer my pieces. I just buy these off of Etsy. There's so many fabulous artists that just do these conglomeration pieces, and you can download them in any size you want, so it makes it really nice to make different beads with them. And I've just added all these different watch faces in this long fringy piece just because I really wanted something fun and eclectic with these faces. And this one looks like it has 2 faces, but it only has one. The circle here, this is from my video Prints on Polymer Clay, which just I show how to transfer some printing paper. And I've put that opposite of this because it mimics the circle, yet complements it with all of the pink beads. And these are the football beads that I've made that are very simple to make. Sometimes people think that just because I don't show them in lots of things, I'm not using them. I'm using everything I make. I just need to find the piece that they fit in, and right here, this all went really well together, and so there was its home. Sometimes you just have to make beads and wait until you find the place that you need them. It's easier to bead that way because then you find these eclectic beads that all complement each other and fill your pieces and make them look a lot more interesting. Now this piece was a double strand, and it has kind of a whimsical Willy Wonka, Alice in Wonderland feel with the way the little half pods went around things. These are all the half pods that you saw me make in the video, and I used them in both pieces because I just like the way they kind of complemented each other. And I thought they were more interesting as a side piece than something straight in the center. So you can do your work that it goes any direction. Don't be limited to just one shape or form. And here's that 3-layered piece that was just straight down. I felt this was so large that I didn't really want to fringe on it. I felt that might be too much. It was just interesting the way it was with the different textures and the different clock faces. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope I gave you lots of ideas and inspiration. And check out my other video and see what I do with the watch cases. Thanks for watching.